pretty well. Getting a little younger, so a little easier to see the evidence for it. There was a block, I'll just call it like India, it's called the Medicine Hat Block, and it collided with our continental crust, the Wyoming Craton. The zone where it collided is called the Great Falls Tectonic Zone, running in a northeast-southwest trend, right through, you can see here's Montana, so from the Dillon area up to Great Falls, and this is fantasy up here because it's in the subsurface and not something we can see. But nonetheless, we do know that we have exposures to the Medicine Hat Block. We have really understand the Wyoming Craton very well, and they collided. There was ocean floor that was subducting prior to it, probably generating that granite that existed at 2.8. Eventually in came a non-subductible, a piece of continental lithosphere, and it couldn't go down. It had the same density as our Wyoming continent, and it stuck to it. And it made more continent. Everybody good? It's called the Big Sky orogeny. What does the word orogeny mean? It means mountain building. Okay? I try to keep the word orgasmic away from orogeny, especially in front of students. But one thing you can see is, look at how beautiful this metamorphosed rock is. It's just gorgeous. So you have a layer, you have layering, but the layering is from metamorphism. It's from pressure and temperature that segregated minerals away from one another into those light and dark bands. And then the bands themselves were folded. And it may be, although they're still debating it, I talked to the folks that are the experts on this, it may be that this folding is evidence of the collision of that block and this block. All right, now we're getting to stuff I can get my head around. So starting around 1.47 billion years to maybe 1.5 max billion years ago, but what's 300 million years between friends? We started extending. North America had built itself into a large continent, and it was attached to other continents, and we had a supercontinent, like that thing Pangaea that Wegener, which is younger. This one's called Nuna, and we don't really fully understand it because, again, the rocks are old, but I think it's showing up in consensus in the literature that Nuna existed, and it broke apart. And when it broke apart, one of the things that happened was the development of a rift in Montana that trends from southwest Montana kind of up to the northwest, up into Canada. And in that pull apart, which is a rift, right? So what's going on? Down at depth inside the Earth, convective cells are doing this. They're rising and they're moving apart from one another. That's taking the overlying lithosphere and it's pulling it apart. So the continent is being pulled apart. Everybody okay? As it breaks up, blocks drop down and blocks rise up. And eventually what will happen is one of these areas of downdropping block will take over as a major area of downdropping block and create a rift, right? Like the Red Sea or the Gulf, the Gulf of California, with Baja being rifted off of Mexico. So the Belt Sea was probably one of these places that was rifting apart, and it got invaded by ocean water that came in from up here to these are all present coordinates, right? They came up here from the northwest and came in this direction into the sea, making the sea. And it was clearly sometimes connected to the ocean and sometimes not. My advisor was goddamn Don Winston at the University of Montana in Missoula, by God. And the belt was what he did all of his life. And by God, the belt is a lake. There wasn't any ocean in the goddamn belt. And this is exactly how Don talked. Adding a few Christ commanders in there, shithouse rats, and a number of other, wonderful terms that I have no idea where they came from, but I've lived with them all my life and used them frequently. So Don was probably right that the belt also had times when it was a lake and was not connected to that ocean, and there were times when it was connected to that ocean. That doesn't surprise me because we see that on the planet today in rifts, right, where they can be inundated by ocean water or they cannot. But what's neat about it is it was deposited at a time when the only thing on the planet that was a life form, for the most part, were cyanobacteria. These are bacteria that photosynthesize to make a living. And those cyanobacteria trapped sediment and created these weird domal mounds called stromotolites. And you can see them in Glacier National Park, right? Go to Logan Pass, and you walk the boardwalk out to Hidden Lakes. There's stromotolites all over the place in those rocks. If you really want to see them, cross the road after saying a prayer and get on to the Garden Wall Trail. And there's gorgeous, huge cone-shaped stromotolites in the rocks there. All right. But what really floats my boat as a sedimentologist in these belt rocks is that they are loaded with ripple marks and mud cracks and raindrop imprints. Oh my God. Raindrop imprint from a storm that went across a mud flat 1.4 billion years ago, made a pockmark in the mud that got buried by more sediment, and then I walk by and see it 1.4 billion years later. That gets me orgasmic. That's pretty orgasmic right there. This is Flint Creek Hill down from Georgetown Lake. A must-see. Just watch the traffic. But that hill, what a great exposure. Mud cracks and ripple marks and so on. You don't have to deal with the crowds of Glacier National Park, right? But the park, I bow to the park. I've spent many years working in the park, and it's great. Glacier National Park. Not the park. I get into trouble down here saying that. Okay, so Earth was really more like Mars with a little bit of scum on it. Little bit of life, little cyanobacteria. Not much else. There's certainly no evidence of multicellular animals at this time. And so the reason why all this stuff is so well preserved is there was nothing around to churn it up. Sediments are loaded with organics. And if there is something to eat, it's gonna get eaten, right? So if those sediments have organics in them, they're gonna get chewed up and pooped out by an animal. And you're gonna end up with that being destroyed. So the sedimentary structures later on in the rock record disappear, if you will. I mean, they're there, but like in the belt, no. No, way less orgasmic. The minute animals got around to beating them up, it got less orgasmic. All right, how am I doing on time? Does it really matter? It's geological time.